Well, good morning, everyone, and I want to thank everybody for taking some time this morning to join us for this conversation with the Director of the Iowa Economic Development Authority and the Iowa Finance Authority, Debi Durham. She's no stranger to all of you on the call. She's been up here a number of times to represent a lot of your businesses, and at the same time, I think was just most recently our speaker at our annual Economic Outlook Breakfast here in January. So Debi, thanks for being here this morning. And before I'll let you get started, I'll say thank you on behalf of the Story County business community. We had 39 businesses receive Iowa Small Business Relief Funds for a total of $814,185. So I'll let that set the tone for your comments this morning.
Well, Dan, good morning to all, and thank you, Dan, for this opportunity. I do remember that breakfast well, and I have to say I'm longing for the day where we can all gather once again in person. And as Dan and I were talking about earlier on, we have about 200 plus, a little over 200 plus employees between Ieda and IFA, and 95% of them have been working from home from some time. So there's only a handful of us here on any given day. But I couldn't be prouder of the work that they're doing on behalf of our citizens. I mean, and Dan alluded to one, we propped up a program that didn't have any rules under the emergency provision that Governor Reynolds was granted by the legislature to serve a population of our industry businesses that we don't normally serve. But it's certainly those small businesses, and as something we all know and say, but it is so true, that they are the backbone of our economy, and trying to get, cash flow out as quickly as possible. I think did we learn some things from this process? Absolutely. Could we have done some things different? There's no doubt in my mind. But overall, I'm very proud of the work that our team did and how they did the triaging, and that's really what it ended up being. So we're doing that. At the same time, though, we have to keep an eye towards the recovery, because the economy will open up someday. I hope that's sooner than later, but I don't have any words of wisdom. I can't answer that question because, as you know, and what I have been so proud of is our governor and her leadership during this extraordinary time. She has based every decision she's made from day one. From our first case of COVID, and even in preparation of that, she's based all of her decisions on metrics and data, and it's not been emotional. It's been extremely measured, and I couldn't be prouder of that. And we've tried to do the same thing in anything we roll out at Ieda. It's based on information that we're gathering in real time from our business community. So again, we're looking towards that road to recovery. There will be a recovery task force. Obviously, Ieda will have a key role on that, on what that final plan looks like, as well as businesses. As you know, Governor Reynolds and myself, we really spend a lot of time. That's why we spend as much time as we do in our communities and working through great organizations like Dan's to really capture the pulse of what our industry sectors are seeing, and so that we make sure that we're not leaving any sector out, and that we're offering a roadmap going forward that is going to basically lean down that recovery curve, right? And that's what we all want to do. I think the good news is, if I reflect on this, and something to certainly think about, we went into this in such a strong position, much stronger than so many other states. And I say that on twofold. Not only was our economy extremely strong, though there were some soft spots. Manufacturing the last year had seen some depression, not depression, that's the wrong word, seen some slight off numbers, but that was beginning to come back. And of course, then as you think about that, the way we manage our state budget, we are a fiscally sound state, and very, very proud of that. We're conservative, and that, knowing that we went into this with the kind of reserves, is also comforting to know. The other thing that I don't think any of us have an idea of what it's going to mean. I have, been doing this longer than I want to admit. And so I've been through several of these ebb and flows of the economy. Dan, you've probably been there with me on a few of those, right? So we've seen 9/11, we've seen the recession of 08, 09. What I don't ever remember is the extraordinary response from our federal government, how quickly they have infused cash to individuals, business reform programs getting out the door, and incredible amounts of liquidity in our economy. You think about it, and if you haven't had a chance to look at the Paycheck Protection list of the amounts that the number of loans and the amounts that Iowans are getting, and you think about that circulating in, and even our small $24 million fund in comparison of what we're putting out on the streets to our small businesses, and you take into the individual checks that are going to be rolling, the increased amounts for unemployment, even though I know that has its challenges on the other side, believe me. I just don't know that we've really been able to factor what that means, assuming that we have the opportunity to open up segments of our economy sooner. So with that, maybe I should just pause, Dan, and take a breath, take a drink of my Zen tea that I've been trying to drink these days. And then we can answer any questions you have or hear from your membership.
That sounds good, Debbie. Thank you. I'll start with the first question, then I'll open it up to, we've got around, I think, 70 participants on the call today.
Great.
We're hearing a lot about drug production and PPE production offshore. Do you see that having a positive impact as that comes, if that should come back stateside? Does Iowa have a role in that, in the attraction of those types of industries?
First of all, it's a great question, and the answer is absolutely, yes, without a doubt. And when you think about it, and you know this so well, that manufacturing is the largest, gross state product for our economy, and why we value that. Over the years, we have seen that gradual, leaving of our industries to other states. And I think when it came, we've now been hit with the realization that so much of that particularly that has to do with our health and safety, needs to be brought back to shore. The other thing we have to look at, Dan, and there is nobody that understands this better than the Ames Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Organization, because where you sit in partnership with Iowa State University, think about the platforms, the bio platforms on the immunotherapies and vaccines. But there's a return on investment to drug manufacturers when they're dealing with a cancer treatment, right? Or something, or diabetes. There is that great return. We do not incentivize companies at the same level when you're talking about vaccines that are preventing a pandemic like what we're in, correct? I think we have to continue, I think we have to turn our formula for how we as a nation fund these kind of initiatives going forward. And I see that a huge play for Iowa State University.
Very good. Thank you. I'll open it up to our participants. Questions for Debbie? If not, I have more.
I was going to say this is going to be a short call.
Debbie, this is Mike Ruff.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for your time today. Questions on food supply. Certainly, I know from firsthand experience that there's plenty of pigs and cattle and chickens on the grounds, but with what we've seen at Tyson and Smithfield and now, getting product out of distribution into the market, what role are you guys playing, and what's your forecast on that?
Yeah, so we've actually been very engaged with that, not only from our office, but certainly the governor directly and the Department of Public Health, working with them to, as I've talked to many of these CEOs, they shut down many of them for a period of time to do a deep clean because they were showing the number, a concerning, I would say, number of people testing positive. As they look to reopen, they are certainly doing what they can to provide all, to make sure that they're following all the CDC guidelines as far as staggering when people can come to work, how breaks are done, using that 6 feet as much as they can, providing PPE equipment to all of their employees, so on and so forth. The other key thing that the Governor Reynolds worked with Washington on, with our federal partners, was to get as much rapid testing as these facilities as possible, because as you talked about, they are so critical to talk about essential businesses to our food supply chain. And you go into any of these plants, They still haven't, even though they've done a lot of robotics in these new plants, and from a public safety point of view to also obviously streamlining the process, they are still pretty dense as far as employees. So they are working through it. We're in constant contact with them. And not only us, even Secretary Perdue, with the Secretary of Ag, has had personal conversations with all the CEOs of these industries to see what resources they can bear. So it is something we're very engaged with. We're staying very much on top of it and working again with those industry leaders to make sure that we're doing what's right by their employees, but we're able to keep that supply chain open.
Thanks, Debbie.
Other questions? Debbie, I'll jump in. We've got a great project going to your board of directors and you tomorrow, or today and tomorrow. Amcor is
Yes.
contemplating significant expansion here in our community. And what I'm wondering is, as going forward for our businesses, how much will this pandemic and the money that's going out of the state budget and frankly out of your budget, how will it impact your financial incentive programs going forward for our businesses going forward?
Well, thank you for that, because that is a great project, and we're so glad to be still being able to move projects forward under our high quality jobs program, which is basically where we spend most of our resources as an organization. Here's what I've heard, Dan. So far, I've not heard of any indication from legislators they're going to cut our budget. I think they see how important our finances have been and our resources to help deal with things in a very needed way. So I'm hoping that we're not going to see anything going forward. But what I can tell you is this, that as we look at this recovery task force, I think it is an incredible opportunity to really pivot and say, what should our incentives and programs for manufacturing, insurance, and finance, startups in particular, what should that look like, right? I mean, why we should seize this opportunity to have the conversation that you and I have been having for a long time. I think we all know that we've been able to do incredible work with the resources we have, but I also think it's time to look at modernizing those, and I think they can be even more impactful. And so we're going to seize the opportunity with this new task force to identify those things. So what you could do for me, not only, of course, will the Chamber Alliance be part of that, but I really want information back from your industries of, if you could kind of rewrite the playbook, right? If you could rewrite on what incentives or how we handle our taxation of different industries, what would that look like? And I think we need to challenge ourselves to be creative and see what comes from that.
Sure. Debbie, I've got a question here from one of our city administrators here in Story County. With Debbie being in charge of the Iowa Finance Authority, has there been any talk about possibility of cities getting a grace period on SRF loans? Many of these loans are revenue loans, and with residents out of work, some are finding difficulty making their utility payments, which in turn lowers the city revenue funds.
Yes. So first of all, we work in partnership with our communities, and yes, we're not going to do a blanket waiver that says you don't need to make payments or whatever. We're going to work with communities, individually, and we will certainly make concessions as we need to. But what we all have to keep in mind that we also have bond payments that have to be made. And so, yes, we're willing to work with you on a case-by-case basis. The other thing that would be good for our cities that is on the board, the Treasury has opened up some bonding capabilities for Operation Fund for a 2-year period of time. We are reviewing that program to see if IFA can play a role in helping, and that money is really just for communities to provide some liquidity to them, knowing that many of their receipts are going to be off. Again, it's a short-term funding cycle. What we don't know at this point is that's great, and we're certainly open, and we certainly have the capability on staff to do that. But the questions that we're asking along with the governor's office is, what is that basis point going to look like? What is that financing spread? Because obviously we'll still have to take some administrative, though, law out of it. And so we just need to make sure that what we're offering is something that's beneficial for our cities and counties. But yes, absolutely, we will work with you on a one-to-one basis on the existing SRF, but we are also looking at some of these new Treasury opportunities to see how we can help our cities and counties.
Thanks, Debbie. Another question from the audience? Okay, I've got a question that was sent in to me, Debbie. It was from Kevin Burke from the Ames Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I would ask this question as well. I've got a number of board members on here who are equally concerned about, the viability of organizations like ours.
Yes.
Do you see any recovery funds coming forward for the organizations like the Ames Convention and Visitors Bureau, your visitors organizations, your chambers of commerce, your economic development entities?
Yeah, so it was disappointing when you saw, and then listen, I get it because, some people think on our small business relief, we completely missed the mark. So I completely understand. So I'm not criticizing the Paycheck Protection because I honestly believe overall it was one of the best stimulus programs out there.
I'd agree.
What was disappointing to me, and the thing I also liked about it, it was ever evolving. They were actually listening to people, right? So I think the question was, why are 501c36s not covered? I think I would, if we open it back up, and I'm hoping we do, because I think as of today we're probably going to run out of money, from what I understand. That is one reform that needs to be done, because I think that's ideal. The nonprofits, though, are still qualified. So I think that's something to look at. Tourism will be part of this reform, or this recovery task force that the governor is putting together. Tourism is a huge industry, almost $9 billion to us. We will continue. There is that $1.25 billion the governor is going to receive directly from the Treasury. I think hopefully next week we'll have at least half the funds. Again, we're still waiting on guidelines of what that can be used for. It sounds like we have a pretty tight time on when we can get that money out the door, at least allocated. So we're looking at everything. And I do know that, unfortunately, at least with the small business reform, other than the hospitality industry, as far as restaurants and bars, we're trying to take care of them and triage them as quickly as possible. They're the ones that were caused to close early on. But we'll see what we can do. We understand it's a real concern out there. And so we're going to, we haven't forgotten it. I wish I could tell you clearly, yes, we have a definite plan. I don't have that answer today, Dan, but I can tell you we're very sensitive to that industry, as tourism is part of our family here at IEDA. And we're going to do what we can to help the industry as we rebound and open the economy back up.
Thank you. A couple questions here that have been typed into us here. Is there any assistance available for those of us who own real estate and do not have employees, and we're not eligible for PPP? And then further, the comment is made, there's a threat to rent collection with current tenants, in renewal of lease agreements, and retaining tenants. Are there programs available that will help support essentially real estate investors and people that are providing commercial space to a whole host of tenants?
Yeah, so again, I don't know that I have a great answer for that, other than that segment of our economy as well has been elevated to the governor's office and elevated to our partners in Washington, that we need to think about this. I can tell you in the past, in 08, 09, that there are funds that will come to IFA on the IFA side, and we have in the past provided some rent assistance back to those landlords, right, of people that got behind. Now, but understand though, Dan, that's just in the population we serve, which is the LMI, the low to moderate income. That's not market rate stuff. And so we do know that we are working on a plan here of how we're going to use our ESG funds. And we know we've got some real concerns out there, at least in that population as well. So that's what we hope to do. We don't have our final plan out on how we're going to use those funds, but we're working on it. But for those that have market rate, we also understand that's a real concern, and it has been elevated. But again, unfortunately, this is such a fluid situation. I don't have a remedy for that right now.
Okay. Here's a question from Chad Randick from Burke Corporation in Nevada. Can you
Yeah.
provide an update on the ethanol industry and as well an update on the CO2 supply chain that is attached, associated with some ethanol plants? He goes on
Yeah.
to say, without a reliable source of CO2, many food manufacturers will not be able to run, as CO2 is used in the humane stunning of animals as well as the freezing of finished goods.
Right. Great question. Great to hear from our good friends there at Burke. So yeah, I'm very familiar with this. We also run the energy department, and Brian Sellinger, our team lead's kind of taken the lead on this. And first of all, let's talk about the ethanol plants. Again, an industry that has had major issues due to public policy, that was not friendly to our biofuels industry. So we were running into this situation already in a very difficult situation. So we have elevated that. We do know, as we look at recovery, that biofuels is something that we really have to look at from what we're going to do from a state perspective going forward. On the CO2, you're right, that has been a major concern. I think it was Cirrus actually, I believe it was Cirrus that actually charted out a supply chain with CO2. And what we can do is offline, I can connect you with Brian Sellinger, our energy team. But I can also tell you, I personally called CF Industries out of Sioux City, because they have, obviously, they're a huge producer of CO2. And they do have a partner that they work with that can take it off in a form that our industries can use. And so we provided that company name to several companies. And we can work with CF to see if it's possible that we can process more. I do know that, but I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Cirrus has been doing a charting out a supply chain on this. So we should definitely follow up.
Okay. Before I ask the next question that's been sent in, is there anybody on the call that would like to ask a question of Debbie? Debbie, you must be very thorough today. Nikki Kyle, who is the fixed base operator of the Ames Municipal Airport, asks,
Yep.
does the state have any intentions to help private and commercial transportation industries that have been negatively impacted?
Yes, obviously that's going to be handled through the Department of Transportation. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, maybe it would be a good idea to have Scott come on and do a similar roundtable. That's obviously under his jurisdiction. I do know that the Treasury have released some guidelines and some programs that could help our airline industry across the state. But that's going to be handled by Scott. So I would just defer you to the DOT to answer those questions more definitively.
Thank you. Another question is, if we would run into a longer term shutdown, will there be opportunities to extend repayment on IEDA funded loans, for example, demonstration fund opportunities?
Absolutely. We went in very early and very proactively and basically suspended all payments and interest payments for a period of time. And then, obviously we just kick it down the road. And so it's not a case where you have to defer it, where you have to pay it back those 3 months. As the longer it goes, Dan, we will continue to look at that and monitor it. And without a doubt, we're going to work with our communities and our innovation and our startup community on that and make the concessions that we need to make.
Good enough. One person reached out and said a few weeks ago there was mention of assisting daycares with community development block grant funds rather than the IEDA Small Business Relief Fund.
Yeah.
Do you still anticipate that happening?
Yeah, so here's what the situation we have. There were a number of daycares that came in with the small business relief. And the for-profit ones, we actually have already taken care of in our money. So we got that. They were included in this $24 million release that we did. The ones that are nonprofit, we actually still were working through, my hope was that we could deal with that with the CDBG. And we've allocated $2.4 million emergency funds that would be available. But right now, my guidelines from CDBG is it has to be used to basically brick and mortar increase capacity. It cannot be used for operation. So we, Dan, are going through the process of asking HUD for a waiver. Now, we haven't looked at the new guidelines coming forth with this because CDBG will be receiving about a $14.6 million allocation to deal with COVID issues. Daycare is a priority in that funding as well. And we are asking for the relaxation of the rules that we can use that as an operation. So we're hoping the guidelines are going to give us that flexibility. They have certainly been extremely good to work with so far, is being flexible. But that's just until we know. I can't tell you exactly that we're going to be able to take care of that as an operation, but that is our intention.
Thank you. Question from Jim Holtz here. What are you hearing as far as funding for infrastructure in either the next or future recovery bills? Are you hearing anything from the federal level on infrastructure?
Absolutely. In fact, our president talks about that frequently, and I think we all agree. One, we needed an infrastructure bill for this country anyway, and what better time to do this and to really get people back to work. So obviously, we're very supportive of that, and we are hearing a lot of activities about that of interest. Hopefully, it will garner bipartisan support, as I think it should. In the past, we've always maintained or been able to garner bipartisan support for infrastructure. But yeah, there is quite a bit of conversation about it, and we are certainly lending our voice to support that as well.
Thank you. Dave Tucker asks, a number of startups that were struggling to find people are now in the position of just trying to keep the people they have.
Yes.
Are there any plans to help incentivize others to support them, increased angel tax credits or anything of that nature?
Well, yes, absolutely. So, the Ways and Means Chair reached out to our legislative liaison and said, look, when we come back, what is your priority? Because we want to get our business done and obviously get out of there, as we can understand. And increasing the angel tax credit was on our agenda for IEDA, and we have actually elevated that up, that is in fact a priority for us. So we absolutely agree with that. The other thing is we are talking with the Treasury. Back after the 08-09 a downturn and recession, there was actually some funding that we used, and I can't remember the exact name. Everybody has these long names for everything. But what I can tell you is that we utilized those funds, and it was about probably $13+ million for Iowa. We used it all on the Innovation Fund, and that's really what started our demo and everything. And so we're also floating that along with the infrastructure. We would like to see that in future reform packages. We're also asking Treasury to encourage the reenactment of this because unfortunately it just expired, but as far as I know, it's still there on their books. So we're also looking for new things that we can do to put into this innovation side. The thing that we see about our economy, and it's always been true, that during recession times, and I'm not predicting that, but what we saw in 08-09, that there were so many people that during that, there was this huge uptick, obviously, in our startups and innovation platform or pipeline. And I think that we may see the same thing coming out of this, and so we just want to be ready for it. So really a great question. Thank you.
Another question from the audience? I'll jump back in here, Debbie, with another question that we had here. Everybody's looking for some direction on at what point we'll have more latitude to open things back up. Any indication from what you're hearing from the governor's office or from the federal level on how much longer we may be in the situation we're in?
Dan, I really can't answer that. This thing is so fluid, and that's why the governor is doing her daily press conferences. It's why the White House is doing daily press conferences. And of course, now we're beginning to see that, there are certain sectors, or certain regions that are, obviously more of a hot spot than others. And so I know there's been all kinds of conversations, but I really, I would hate to say something that I could be contradicted at this very moment by the governor's press conference that I think starts at 11. So, but, again, we're looking at everything. It will be done the same way she's done everything else. It will be based on the data that she has before her, and it will be very measured. She's listening to a lot of different advice, voices to make sure she has the entire picture when she's making these decisions. And I honestly completely trust that she will guide us through this in a very transformational way.
Thank you. Question here regarding supplies of pork and feed grains from importers in Mexico.
Yeah.
And broadly speaking, we've got plant closures where they've had a high incidence rate of COVID. Does the state have a role? Does your organization have a role in trying to essentially keep the food supply chain open?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we're working again with the governor's office in Washington on that. And of course, we run the international office, and I know our international team has been really focused on working with our commodity groups on that supply chain. And for not only that, even for DDGs and everything is included, and they're giving me regular updates. So yes, we definitely have a voice in that, and it's something that we're following very closely.
Thanks. Question here from Kate Lyon. Startup assistance, question on startup assistance and related changes. Is the IEDA looking at changes in tax credits or the streamline of the funding process with innovation funds?
Yes, I can tell you yes, and all of the above. We are looking at that. And so we've been looking at that anyway, Kate, to be honest. But this certainly, I think, makes this a really finer point and kind of, I think, accelerates our review of those programs.
The questions from the audience. I think I've gotten through all that were sent to me. Debbie, one general question would be, how can we help with your messaging and frankly, what hurdles do you see on the horizon for groups like the AEDC and the Chamber and others? And how do we collaborate and how do we work together going forward?
Well, that's another great question. I mean, first of all, I would really refer all of your members and those on the call to www.iowabusinessrecovery.com. It's our landing page. And though there's great data out there from CDC guidelines to all of that, our page is really focused on the economic side of things. So anything that touches the economy, we try to keep updated. And so that information is there. We did do, early on as I was trying to figure out what we could do in a short term and which ultimately launched the Small Business Relief Fund, was that survey that we did in partnership with you and I in our Institute for Decision Making. And those results are there. The executive summary, the plan is to go back out in the field on May 1st. And we do use this data. We're using this data not only to do short-term, more immediate kind of decision making, but also to do long-term reform packages. So that's all extremely important. That you ask your members to participate. I know they're getting hit by a dozen different surveys, but this is what I explained to Doug and Dustin yesterday, Dan, on behalf of the Chamber Alliance. People are doing a lot of different surveys. I'm not looking at them. I'm looking at the ones that we're doing. And so that's the one I really need you to do. Exception for Cirrus. Cirrus actually did a really great job of really honing in on manufacturing, and we actually put their results on our site as well. So we do need you to participate in those surveys because we can only respond with the information that we have. And we're trying not to overburden you, but that's something you could definitely do to help me right now.
Well, I can tell you that we had a really good response when you sent out that initial survey here a few weeks ago.
Yes, you
frankly,
did.
Our business community understands the impact of your organization. As I see the list of companies that are on this call right now, the Iowa Economic Development Authority and previously the Iowa Department of Economic Development played a big hand in a number of these companies' expansions and coming to fruition. So I think our business community clearly understands how important our partnership is. And so please call or provide feedback on how we can be helpful, and we will certainly respond accordingly.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, are there any other questions for Director Durham this morning? Now's your chance. We've got her.
But you do know how to get a hold of me. Yes, you all know how to get a hold of me. Yes.
But she's a busy lady, and it's hard to get her undivided attention sometimes.
Even when you're sitting in front of me, sometimes it's hard to do that, right? Yeah.
True enough.
Yeah.
Well, Debbie, I don't see anything else coming in on the Q&A.
Okay.
I haven't seen anybody raise their hand, but know that we appreciate the leadership you're providing across our state. But we've benefited tremendously, whether it's Burke over in Nevada or EB in Story City or Amcor today and tomorrow here in Ames with their great expansion. There's a whole host of really unique opportunities that have been pushed forward with the assistance of Debi Durham and her agency. And so thanks for all you're doing. Let us know how we can be helpful. And I know I share your optimism for today. We are one day closer to this being over, and we'll get back to business and we'll be better than ever.
Well, thank you, Dan. And I would be remiss if I don't talk about, this is not about Debi Durham. This is about this incredible team of people that I have I work with every day. And I have to tell you that what they've done in the last few weeks have been nothing short of heroic. And I'm proud to serve with them. And, nobody does it alone, as you know. So with the great team that I have and support from the governor's office, and of course, like your partnership, it's what makes it work. And I think it's also what makes Iowa really, really special. So God bless you. And, whatever I can do, we are listening and we are responding accordingly. So keep those ideas and thoughts coming our way.
Okay, Debbie, thank you so much for making time for us today.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you all.